The twin suns of Kepler 442b blazed overhead as Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead. The mining drill hummed loudly in his hands, cutting through the rocky surface of the alien planet. Around him, the human mining colony buzzed with activity. Workers moved between massive extraction machines, their voices calling out over the noise of heavy equipment. Jake had been on this planet for 3 years now. He knew its moods better than most. During the day, temperatures soared to over 120 degrees. At night, they dropped to -40. It was a harsh world. But the rare minerals buried in its crust made the hardship worthwhile. The blue crystals they extracted were essential for faster-than-light travel, making this small colony very valuable to Earth. "Jake, come look at this," called Lisa Parker from across the mining site. She was crouched beside a deep scanner, studying the readings on its screen. Lisa had joined the colony 6 months ago, fresh from engineering school on Mars. Her enthusiasm reminded Jake of his own early days here. Jake shut off his drill and walked over. The afternoon heat made the air shimmer, and he could feel the sun burning through his protective suit. "What did you find?" Lisa pointed to the scanner display. "There's a massive deposit about 50 meters down. Bigger than anything we've seen before. The readings are off the charts." Jake studied the numbers. His eyes widened. If Lisa was right, this single deposit could supply Earth's fleet for years. "We need to get a team down there tomorrow. This could change everything." The sound of engines overhead made them both look up. 3 sleek ships moved across the sky, their silver hulls reflecting the harsh sunlight. They were unlike anything in the human fleet. The ships moved in perfect formation, silent except for a low humming sound. "Those aren't ours," Lisa said, her voice tense. Jake reached for his radio. "Control, this is Jake Morrison at Site 7. We have unknown vessels approaching from the north." Static crackled through the radio. Then came a voice Jake didn't recognize, speaking in heavily accented English. "Human colony, this is Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will cease all operations immediately. Prepare for inspection." The 3 ships landed in a triangle formation around the mining site. Jake watched as the vessel's doors opened with a hiss. What emerged made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians were tall, nearly 7 feet each, with blue-scaled skin that gleamed in the sunlight. They wore armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, adjusting to their movements. Their faces were angular, with large golden eyes that missed nothing. Each carried weapons that hummed with energy. Commander Vextar stepped forward. His armor was more elaborate than the others, with glowing symbols that pulsed with light. When he spoke, his voice carried authority that made the human workers step back. "I am Commander Vextar of the 3rd Expansion Fleet. This world now belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Your presence here is unauthorized." Jake stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is a legally established human colony. We have mining rights granted by the Galactic Trade Council." The commander's golden eyes fixed on Jake. "Your councils and laws mean nothing to us. We claim this world by right of conquest." He gestured to his soldiers. "Gather the humans. We will determine their fate." The Zephyrian soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. They rounded up the mining crew, using their energy weapons to herd the humans into a group. Jake counted 23 colonists, including himself and Lisa. Some were engineers like him, others were geologists, mechanics, and support staff. All of them looked frightened. "Why are you doing this?" asked Dr. Helen Grant, the colony's chief scientist. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her voice was firm. "We're miners, not soldiers. We pose no threat to your empire." Commander Vextar studied her with interest. "Threat? No, but you possess something we need. Your mining technology is impressive. Your ability to extract resources from difficult environments could serve the empire well." Jake felt his stomach drop. They weren't here to destroy the colony. They were here to take them. "We will not be your slaves." Jake said, surprised by his own boldness. The commander's expression might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with his alien features. "Slaves, perhaps?" "That depends on whether you prove worthy of the Empire's attention. You will be tested." The soldiers forced the humans toward the ships. Jake noticed that despite their intimidating appearance, the Zephyrians seemed uncomfortable in the planet's heat. Their armor was working overtime to keep them cool, and several soldiers repeatedly adjusted their temperature controls. "Where are you taking us?" Lisa asked as they were pushed. "Toward the nearest ship. To a place where your worthiness will be measured," Commander Vexstar replied. "There is an old tradition among my people. The night trial, those who survive it earn the right to serve the Empire. Those who do not." He left the sentence unfinished. The interior of the Zephyrian ship was surprisingly cold. Jake realized their environmental systems were set for much lower temperatures than humans preferred. The walls were smooth metal, glowing with the same symbols he'd seen on the commanders. Honor. The soldiers motioned for the humans to sit on benches that ran along the walls. As the ship lifted off, Jake looked through a small window. Below, he could see the mining colony growing smaller. The equipment they'd spent years setting up, the prefab buildings that had been home, the landing pad where supply ships from Earth would dock. All of it was now under alien control. "What do you think this night trial is?" Lisa whispered beside him. Jake shook his head. "Nothing good, but we'll face it together." The flight took 2 hours. Through the window, Jake watched the landscape change from the rocky mining area to empty plains and then to a region of low hills. The ship finally landed on a flat plateau surrounded by jagged peaks. As the doors opened, Jake felt the temperature difference immediately. The sun was setting and the air was already growing cold. Commander Vexstar stood at the ship's entrance. "Welcome to your testing ground, humans. When the sun set completely, the night trial begins. You will have until dawn to prove your worth." To the Empire, Jake stepped out onto the plateau. The ground was hard and rocky, with scattered boulders and patches of scrubby vegetation. In the distance, he could see the lights of a Zephyrian outpost, but it was too far to reach on foot. "What exactly is this trial?" Dr. Grant asked. The commander's golden eyes gleamed in the fading light. "Simple, survive the night. The temperature will drop to levels that have defeated many species. You will be given basic supplies. Those who see the dawn will earn the right to serve the Empire. Those who do not will feed the ice wolves." The first stars were already appearing in the darkening sky. Jake could feel the temperature dropping fast. Soon this plateau would become a frozen wasteland. And somehow, he and his fellow humans would have to survive until sunrise. The night trial was about to begin. Image. Description for Leonardo AI, a rocky alien plateau at sunset with twin suns setting in the distance, showing tall blue-scaled humanoid. Aliens in liquid metal armor standing near sleek silver spacecraft, while human colonists in mining suits huddled together on the barren ground, with jagged mountain peaks surrounding the area and the sky transitioning from orange to purple as night approaches. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the jagged peaks as Commander Vexstar's soldiers began unloading supplies from their transport. The temperature was dropping fast, and Jake could already see his breath forming small clouds in the air. Around him, the other human colonists stood in a tight group, their faces showing fear and confusion. "Each prisoner will receive these items," announced Lieutenant Kraildex, the commander's second in command. His blue scales seemed to darken in the cold air. 1 thermal blanket, 1 metal cup, and 1 cutting tool. These are the same supplies given to Zephyrian youth during their coming-of-age trials. Jake watched as the soldiers handed out the meager supplies. The thermal blanket was thin and silver, about the size of a large towel. The metal cup was simple steel, nothing special. The cutting tool was a basic knife with a 4-inch blade. Not much to survive a night in temperatures that could kill. "This is insane," muttered Dr. Grant, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. "How does anyone survive with just these things?" Commander Vexstar overheard her. "Many do not. That is the point of the trial. Only the strong deserve to serve. The Empire, the weak are removed from the gene pool." Jake noticed something interesting as the commander spoke. Despite his confident words, Vexstar was constantly adjusting controls on his armor. The other Zephyrian soldiers were doing the same thing. Their heating systems were working hard to keep them comfortable, and Jake could see them shivering slightly when they thought no one was looking. "What happens if we all die?" asked Lisa, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Then you were not worthy of the Empire's attention," Vexstar replied. "We will find another species to serve our needs." The soldiers finished distributing supplies and began moving back toward their transport. Jake could see the warm glow of lights through the ship's windows. The Zephyrians would spend the night in heated comfort while the humans faced the deadly cold. "Wait," called out Tom Bradley, one of the mechanics. "What about food? Water?" Lieutenant Kraildix pointed to a small stream running between the rocks. "About 50 meters away. Water is there. Food is what you can find? The trial begins now." The transport doors sealed shut with a loud hiss. Jake watched as the ship lifted off and moved to the Zephyrian outpost in the distance. The humans were alone on the plateau, with darkness falling fast around them. "We need to work together," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The group included 23 humans from the mining colony. Besides Jake and Lisa, there was Dr. Grant, Tom Bradley, and 19 others with various skills. Among them were also 3 non-human prisoners. The Zephyrians had captured elsewhere. 2 were Centaurian traders named Zix and Norrell with their distinctive 4 arms and green skin. The third was a Martian diplomat called Rex Hamilton, his pale skin already turning blue from the cold. "The Centaurians and I have been through Zephyrian trials before," Rex said, his teeth chattering, "but never anything this extreme. Usually, they test combat skills or intelligence. This is different." Zix, the older of the 2 Centaurians, nodded grimly. "The cold is already affecting us badly. Our species are not built for these temperatures. We will not last long." Jake looked around the plateau. The landscape was harsh and barren, with scattered rocks and small patches of dry grass. The stream Rex mentioned was visible in the starlight, a thin line of water winding between the stones. The temperature was dropping every minute, and Jake estimated it would reach -40 degrees before dawn. "We need shelter," said Dr. Grant, "and we need it fast." Most of the group began gathering rocks to build windbreaks. It was the logical thing to do, and Jake helped for a while. But as he worked, his mind was racing. He kept thinking about the planet's geology, about the rocks scattered across the plateau, about the things he'd learned during his years on this world. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lisa asked. She had noticed him picking up different types of stones and examining them closely. "Just looking," Jake replied, but he was doing much more than that. He was identifying rock types, checking their density, their heat retention properties. His engineering background was kicking in, along with memories of survival training he'd received. Before coming to this planet, the other prisoners continued building their shelters. The Centaurians worked together, their 4 arms allowing them to move rocks quickly. Rex helped where he could, but the cold was affecting him badly. The human colonists did their best, but most of them were miners and technicians, not survival experts. "This isn't going to work," Tom Bradley said as he tried to fit rocks together. "These walls won't keep out the cold. We need something better." Jake continued his rock collecting, ignoring the confused looks from the others. He found volcanic stones, dark and heavy, that would hold heat well. He also found lighter sedimentary rocks that could be shaped and worked. Most important, he found flint-like stones that could create sparks. "Jake, you're wasting time," called out Dr. Grant. "Help us with the shelter." But Jake was thinking about something else entirely. During his survival training, he'd learned about techniques used by ancient humans during ice ages. Methods that had allowed his ancestors to survive in conditions just like this, without advanced technology or heated armor. The wind was picking up now, cutting through their thin blankets like ice. Jake could hear the Centaurians making distressed sounds as their body temperature dropped. Rex was huddled in a ball, trying to conserve heat. Even the humans were starting to show signs of hypothermia. "We're going to die out here," whispered one of the younger colonists, a woman named Amy Foster. "Those aliens are going to watch us freeze to death." "No," Jake said firmly. "We're not going to die. But we need to think differently. He looked toward the distant Zephyrian outpost. Through the darkness, he could see lights moving around. The aliens were probably watching them through surveillance equipment, waiting to see how long the prisoners would last. What do you mean, think differently? Lisa asked. Jake held up one of the volcanic stones he'd collected. The Zephyrians gave us these supplies because they work for their species, but we're not Zephyrians. We're human. And humans have been surviving in impossible conditions for thousands of years. The temperature continued to drop. Jake could feel the cold seeping through his clothes, but he wasn't panicking like the others. He was planning. He was remembering techniques that had kept his species alive during the worst conditions Earth had ever seen. The Zephyrians are watching us, he continued. They expect us to fail because that's what most species do, but they don't understand what humans are capable of. In the distance, Jake could see the lights of the Zephyrian transport moving back toward the plateau. The guards were probably coming to check on their prisoners, to see how many had died. In the first few hours, what are you going to do? Asked Dr. Grant. Jake looked at the pile of rocks he'd collected, then at the scared faces of his fellow prisoners. The real trial was just beginning. But for the first time since their capture, he felt a spark of hope. I'm going to show them what humans can do, he said. Image description for Leonardo AI, a frozen alien plateau at night under starlight, showing human colonists in thin silver blankets huddling together building rock shelters, while two four-armed green Centaurians and a pale Martian diplomat sit nearby, with one human man crouched alone examining different types of volcanic rocks scattered on the ground. Distant lights of an alien outpost visible on the horizon and a thin stream of water winding between the stones. The wind howled across the plateau as Jake moved away from the group. The other prisoners were still trying to build their rock shelters, but Jake could see it was a losing battle. The cold was getting worse every minute, and their simple windbreaks would not be enough to keep them alive until dawn. Jake, where are you going? Lisa called after him. Her voice was shaking from the cold, and she pulled her thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. I need to work, Jake replied, carrying his collection of rocks to a spot about 20 meters from the others. Trust me. The temperature was now well below freezing, and Jake could feel the cold trying to seep into his bones. But he had a plan. During his 3 years on this planet, he had learned about its geology. More importantly, he remembered the survival techniques his grandfather had taught him as a child. Jake began by clearing a small area of ground, pushing aside loose stones and debris. He used his knife to scrape away the dirt, creating a shallow depression about 2 feet wide. The other prisoners watched him with confusion, but Jake ignored their stares. He had work to do. Next, he selected the driest pieces of vegetation he could find. The plateau was mostly barren, but there were patches of dead grass and small twigs scattered between the rocks. Jake gathered these carefully, sorting them by size. He needed fine material for tinder, medium pieces for kindling, and larger twigs for fuel. What is he doing? Asked Rex Hamilton, the Martian diplomat. His pale skin had turned blue from the cold, and he was shivering violently. We need to build shelter, not play with sticks. He's trying to make fire, said Dr. Grant, watching Jake work. But that's impossible in this wind. It will just blow out. Jake heard their comments but kept working. He arranged the tinder in a small nest, then placed the kindling around it in a careful pattern. The secret was not just making fire, but making it in a way that would survive the harsh conditions. Using his knife and one of the flint-like stones he had collected, Jake began striking sparks. The first few attempts failed, but he kept trying. His hands were getting numb from the cold, but he forced himself to be patient. 1 spark, 2 sparks, then suddenly a small flame caught in the tinder. He did it, Amy Foster exclaimed. He actually made fire. But Jake was just getting started. He carefully fed the small flame with kindling, building it up slowly. The wind kept trying to blow it out, but Jake had positioned his body to block the worst of it. Gradually, the fire grew stronger. The other prisoners began moving closer, drawn by the warmth, but Jake held up his hand to stop them. Not yet, he said. I need to finish this first. While the fire burned, Jake began working with the rocks he had collected. He selected the volcanic stones first, the dark heavy ones that would hold heat well. These he placed directly in the fire, arranging them so the flames would heat them evenly. "What are you doing with those rocks?" Lisa asked, crouching beside him. She was still shivering, but her curiosity was stronger than her discomfort. "My grandfather taught me this," Jake replied, adding more fuel to the fire. "During the old days on Earth, before we had modern heating, people used heated stones to stay warm at night. The stones hold heat for hours, much longer than a fire." Jake continued feeding the fire and heating the rocks. The volcanic stones began to glow red-hot in the flames. Around the fire, he placed some of the lighter sedimentary rocks, which would heat up faster and could be handled more easily. The other prisoners watched in amazement as Jake's fire grew stronger. The wind that had been defeating their shelter-building efforts actually helped Jake's fire burn hotter. He had chosen his location carefully, using the natural wind patterns to feed oxygen to the flames. "This is incredible," said Tom Bradley, the mechanic. "But what good is a fire if we can't keep it going all night? We don't have enough fuel." Jake smiled, the first time he had smiled since their capture. "That's why we're not depending on the fire. We're depending on these." He pointed to the stones heating in the flames. Some were now glowing bright red, radiating heat that could be felt several feet away. Jake used his knife to carefully move some of the lighter stones out of the fire, then wrapped them in part of his blanket to protect his hands. "The fire heats the stones," Jake explained as he worked. "Then the stones keep us warm for hours. It's like having a battery that stores heat instead of electricity." Jake began digging a shallow pit in the ground, about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. He lined the bottom with some of the heated stones, then covered them with a thin layer of dirt. The ground above the stones began to warm immediately. "It's working," Lisa said in amazement. "I can feel the heat coming up through the ground." Jake carefully removed more stones from the fire, using his blanket to handle them. He arranged them in the pit, creating a bed of radiant heat. Then he covered the stones with more dirt, leaving just enough space for a person to lie down on top. "Who wants to try it?" Jake asked. Amy Foster, who had been shivering the worst, volunteered first. She lay down on the heated ground and immediately sighed with relief. "It's warm," she said in wonder. "Actually warm." The other prisoners stared in amazement. While they had been building shelters that barely blocked the wind, Jake had created a heating system that worked better than anything they had imagined. "How long will it last?" asked Dr. Grant. "These volcanic stones will stay hot for 6 to 8 hours, Jake replied. "Long enough to get us through the night." Jake looked toward the distant Zephyrian outpost. He could see lights moving around, and he was sure the aliens were watching them. They had probably expected the humans to die within the first few hours. But Jake was just getting started. "We need more pits," he said, "and we need to keep the fire going to heat more stones." The other prisoners immediately began helping. Tom Bradley proved good at maintaining the fire, while Dr. Grant helped identify the best rocks for heating. Lisa worked on digging more pits, and even Rex Hamilton, despite his weakness from the cold, helped gather fuel for the fire. The two Centaurian traders, Zix and Norrell, watched the humans work with growing respect. "We have never seen anything like this," Zix said, his forearms wrapped around his body for warmth. "Your species adapts in ways we did not expect." Jake heated more stones and created 2 more warming pits. Soon, most of the prisoners were lying on heated ground, comfortable despite the freezing temperature. The fire continued to burn, providing light and heat for cooking more stones. "The Zephyrians must be confused," Lisa said, lying on her warm patch of ground. "They probably thought we would all be dead by now." Jake looked up at the stars, then toward the alien outpost. "They're about to learn something about humans that they never expected. We don't just survive, we adapt, we overcome. And we do it with nothing but rocks and fire." The night was still young, but for the first time since their capture, the human prisoners were warm, comfortable, and confident. The night trial was far from over, but Jake had shown them something important. With human ingenuity and ancient knowledge, They could survive anything the aliens threw at them. Image description for Leonardo AI. A human man kneeling beside a bright fire on a rocky plateau at night, with glowing red-hot volcanic stones arranged. In the flames, while other human prisoners gather around watching in amazement, one person lying on heated ground covered with dirt and stones, steam rising from the warm earth, scattered tools and blankets nearby, and the orange firelight contrasting with the cold starlit darkness. The night was halfway over when Jake heard the first sound of trouble from the Zephyrian outpost. It was a low humming noise, like machinery working harder than it should. He looked up from tending his fire and saw lights flickering in the distance. Something was wrong with the alien equipment. Did you hear that? Lisa asked from her warm spot on the heated ground. She was comfortable now, no longer shivering like she had been hours earlier. Jake nodded. Their heating systems are having problems. I thought this might happen. Around the fire, the other prisoners were doing much better than anyone had expected. Tom Bradley was keeping the flames going steadily, heating new stones to replace the ones that were cooling down. Dr. Grant had become expert at wrapping the hot rocks safely, and even Rex Hamilton was helping despite his earlier weakness. The two Centaurian traders, Zix and Norrell, had been amazed by the human heating system. They were now lying on their own heated stone beds, their forearms finally relaxed instead of wrapped around their bodies for warmth. How did you know their machines would fail? Asked Amy Foster. She was lying on the warmest spot, having recovered completely from her earlier hypothermia. I've been watching them all day, Jake replied, adding more fuel to the fire. Their armor works fine in normal conditions, but this cold is extreme. Even advanced technology has limits. As if to prove his point, the sound from the outpost grew louder. Jake could see more lights moving around, and he was sure the Zephyrians were having serious problems. Their heating systems were not designed for temperatures this low. Look, said Lisa, pointing toward the plateau. Someone's coming. A single figure was walking toward them from the direction of the outpost. Even in the darkness, Jake could see it was a Zephyrian soldier. The alien was moving slowly, stopping every few steps to adjust controls on his armor. Stay calm, Jake, warned the others. Let me handle this. The soldier reached their camp and stopped just outside the circle of firelight. Jake could see he was shivering despite his advanced armor. The alien's heating system was clearly struggling to keep up with the cold. Human, the soldier said, his voice chattering slightly. You will share your heat source. It was not a request. It was a demand, but Jake noticed something important. The soldier's weapon was not drawn. He was too cold to be threatening. Why should we help you? Jake asked calmly. You left us here to die. The soldier stepped closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth. My armor systems are failing. The cold is beyond our design parameters. I require assistance. Jake looked at the alien with interest. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. What's your name, soldier? I am Sergeant Kexival of the 3rd Expansion Fleet, the alien replied, edging even closer to the fire. You will provide aid immediately. Actually, Jake said, I don't think we will. The Zephyrian's golden eyes widened in surprise. You dare refuse a soldier of the Empire? I dare refuse someone who tried to kill us, Jake replied. But I might be willing to make a deal. Sergeant Kexival was now close enough to the fire that Jake could see him clearly. The alien's blue scales were actually turning darker from the cold, and his breathing was creating visible clouds in the air. His armor was working so hard to keep him warm that Jake could hear the power system straining. What kind of deal? The sergeant asked. Information, Jake said. Tell us about this night trial. Tell us what Commander Vexstar really wants. The alien looked around at the humans, all of them warm and comfortable on their heated stone beds. Then he looked back at the distant outpost where the machinery sounds were getting worse. The commander is impressed by your adaptation, Kexival admitted. He did not expect any species to survive this long. Most prisoners die within the first 2 hours. How many species have you tested? Asked Dr. Grant. Dozens, the sergeant replied. The Altarians lasted 3 hours. The vegan traders managed 4. The longest was a group of Andromedan warriors who survived until midnight. Jake did quick math in his head. It was now past 2 a.m., and his group was not just surviving, but thriving. "And how are you doing, Sergeant?" Kexival's armor made a loud grinding sound, and he winced. "Our heating systems are failing across the outpost. The cold is affecting our power generators. We did not prepare for temperatures this extreme." "So, the hunters are becoming the hunted," Lisa said with satisfaction. Jake studied the shivering alien. "Here's my offer. You can share our fire, but you have to answer our questions honestly, and you have to treat us with respect." The sergeant looked back toward the outpost again. The sounds of struggling machinery were getting worse, and Jake could see several lights had gone out completely. "What do you want to know?" "First, sit down," Jake said. "You're making me nervous standing there." Kexival hesitated, then sat on the ground near the fire. Immediately, his posture relaxed as the warmth reached him. "This is very effective. How does it work?" "Human technology," Jake said with a smile. "We call it fire. It's been keeping us warm for about 100,000 years. "Impossible," the sergeant said. "This is primitive combustion. It cannot be more effective than our thermal regulation systems." "And yet here you are," Tom Bradley pointed out, "sitting at our primitive fire because your advanced systems failed." Jake heated another stone and placed it near the sergeant's feet. The alien's eyes widened as he felt the radiant heat. "This is remarkable. The heated stones provide continuous warmth without requiring power input. Now answer our questions," Jake said. "What does Commander Vexstar really want from us?" Kexival stared into the fire for a moment. "The Empire is expanding rapidly. We conquer worlds easily with our superior technology, but we struggle to survive in harsh environments. Our equipment fails in extreme conditions, like tonight," Lisa said. "Like tonight," the sergeant agreed. "The commander believes that species who can adapt to any environment would be valuable to the Empire. Not as slaves, but as consultants." Jake felt a spark of hope. "Consultants? Teachers," Kexival explained. "The Empire needs to learn how to survive in places our technology cannot handle. Your species shows remarkable adaptability." From the outpost came a new sound, the whine of failing power systems. More lights went out, and Jake could see figures moving around in panic. The Zephyrian base was experiencing a complete system failure. "How many of your people are at the outpost?" Jake asked. 30 soldiers and Commander Vexstar," Kexival replied. "Our transport ships are also affected. The cold is freezing our fuel systems." Jake looked at his fellow prisoners. They were all warm and comfortable, while an entire Zephyrian base was failing in the same conditions. The tables had definitely turned. "Sergeant," Jake said, "I think it's time for you to call your commander. Tell him the humans would like to negotiate." Kexival activated his communication device. "Commander Vexstar, this is Sergeant Kexival. The human prisoners, they wish to speak with you." The response came immediately, and Jake could hear the strain in the commander's voice. "What do they want?" Jake took the communicator. "Commander, this is Jake Morrison. We understand you're having some technical difficulties tonight. We'd like to help." There was a long pause. When Vexstar spoke again, his voice was different. Less commanding, more desperate. "What are your terms, human?" Jake looked around at his companions, all of them warm and confident. "We'll discuss that when you get here, and Commander, you might want to bring some blankets. It's going to be a cold walk." Image description for Leonardo AI. A nighttime scene on an alien plateau, showing a bright campfire surrounded by comfortable human prisoners lying on heated stone beds, with a tall blue-scaled alien soldier in failing powered armor sitting by the fire and shivering, while in the background an alien outpost shows flickering lights and signs of system failure, steam rising from the warm ground around the humans contrasting with the cold starlit darkness. Commander Vexstar arrived at the human camp just as the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon. The proud alien leader looked nothing like the intimidating figure who had captured them hours earlier. His elaborate armor was covered in frost. and he was shivering so badly he could barely walk straight. Behind him came Lieutenant Kraildex and 6 other Zephyrian soldiers, all in the same condition. Their advanced heating systems had failed completely, and they were now dependent on primitive blankets and emergency heating packs that were quickly running out of power. "Commander," Jake said, standing up from his warm spot by the fire. "You look cold. Would you like to sit by our fire?" Vexstar's golden eyes swept over the human camp. All 23 human prisoners were alive and comfortable. The Centaurian traders and Martian diplomat were also doing well, sharing the warmth of the heated stone beds. Steam rose from the ground where the rocks radiated heat, creating a warm zone in the middle of the frozen plateau. "This is impossible," Vexstar said, his voice shaking from the cold. "No species has ever survived the night trial this easily. Most are dead within hours." "We're not most species," Jake replied. "We're human. And we've been surviving in impossible conditions for thousands of years." Lisa stood up beside Jake, no longer the frightened captive from earlier. "Would you like us to explain how it works, Commander? Or would you prefer to keep shivering?" Vexstar looked at his soldiers, all of them barely able to stand from the cold. His pride warred with his practical need for warmth. Finally, survival won. "Show me," he said. Jake gestured to a spot near the fire. "Sit down, Commander. Let me tell you about appropriate technology." The alien leader sat heavily on the ground, immediately sighing with relief as the heat from the fire reached him. "Hissa." Soldiers followed, crowding around the flames like moths drawn to light. "Your technology is impressive," Jake said, adding more fuel to the fire. "Your armor, your ships, your weapons, all very advanced, but they have one weakness." "What weakness?" Vexstar asked, holding his hands toward the flames. "They're complicated," Jake replied. "The more complicated something is, the more ways it can fail. Your heating systems work perfectly in normal conditions, but they can't handle extreme situations." Jake picked up one of the heated stones with his blanket and showed it to the commander. "This rock has been keeping us warm for 8 hours. No power source, no complex circuits, no computer control. Just heat stored in stone." "But this is primitive," Lieutenant Kraildex protested. "Our technology is centuries ahead of this simple combustion." "And yet," said Dr. Grant, "your centuries of advancement couldn't keep you alive tonight." "Our simple fire did." Commander Vexstar stared at the heated stone in Jake's hands. "How did you know this would work?" "My grandfather taught me," Jake replied. "He learned it from his grandfather, who learned it from his. This knowledge goes back thousands of years on Earth. We call it survival wisdom." Jake sat back down on his warm patch of ground. "Commander, you wanted to test our worthiness. You wanted to see if humans could serve your empire. But you've got it backwards." "What do you mean?" Vexstar asked. "You don't need us to serve you," Jake said. "You need us to teach you. Your empire is powerful, but it's also fragile. What happens when you encounter environments your technology can't handle? What happens when your advanced systems fail?" Lisa joined the conversation. "Tonight proved that humans can survive where your technology cannot. We can adapt to any environment using knowledge and ingenuity." Tom Bradley, who had been quietly maintaining the fire all night, spoke up. "We could teach your people these techniques. Not to replace your technology, but to back it up when it fails." Commander Vexstar looked around the camp again. The contrast was striking. His soldiers were huddled around the human fire, dependent on primitive warmth for survival. Meanwhile, the prisoners who were supposed to die were comfortable and confident. "You speak of teaching," Vexstar said slowly. "What would you want in return?" "Freedom," Jake said immediately. "Not just for us, but for all the colonies your empire has conquered. Partnership, not slavery." "Partnership?" The commander's voice showed surprise. "You would work with the empire voluntarily. Think about it," Jake said. "Your empire is expanding. Across the galaxy, you're going to encounter all kinds of environments and challenges. Some of them will be beyond your technology. You need advisors who can help you adapt." Dr. Grant leaned forward. Humans have survived on worlds with toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, high radiation, and crushing gravity. We've learned to thrive in places that would kill most species. And we did it without advanced technology, added Amy Foster. We did it with knowledge, creativity, and determination. Commander Vexstar stood up, his armor finally beginning to warm from the fire. You are proposing that the Empire employ humans as environmental consultants? Not just employ, Jake corrected. Partner with, equal partners, not servants. The alien leader walked to the edge of the firelight and looked back toward his outpost. The sun was rising now, and Jake could see the extent of the damage. Several buildings were dark, and emergency crews were working to restore power. The night trial had been harder on the Zephyrians than on their prisoners. The Empire has never had equal partners, Vexstar said. We conquer and rule. How's that working out for you? Lisa asked pointedly. Your base is half frozen, your soldiers nearly died, and your prisoners are the ones keeping you warm. Vexstar turned back to face them. For a long moment he stared at Jake with those golden eyes. You survived the night trial not just with your lives, but with your dignity. You showed compassion to your captors when you could have let us freeze. This, is unexpected? Jake stood up and walked over to the commander. Humans believe that strength comes from helping others, not dominating them. We survived tonight because we worked together and shared our knowledge. Even with us, Sergeant Kexival added quietly. When I came seeking help, you could have refused. Instead, you shared your fire and your wisdom. The sun was fully up now, painting the plateau in golden light. The night trial was officially over, and every human prisoner had survived. More than survived, they had thrived. Commander Vexstar made his decision. The Empire will offer you a new arrangement. Not slavery, but partnership. You will serve as advisors to our expansion fleets, teaching survival techniques and environmental adaptation. And our colonies? Jake asked. Will be granted autonomous status within the Empire. You will govern yourselves, but provide consultation services when needed. Jake looked at his fellow prisoners. They were all nodding in agreement. This was better than they had dared hope for. There's one more thing, Jake said. We want to teach your people these techniques. Real knowledge sharing, not just emergency consultation. You would teach Zephyrian youth the ways of survival? Vexstar asked. We would teach anyone who wants to learn, Jake replied. Knowledge belongs to everyone. As the warmth of the new day spread across the plateau, Jake began showing the young Zephyrian soldiers how to bank the fire and preserve the heated stones. The aliens watched with fascination as he demonstrated techniques that had kept humans alive for millennia. This is remarkable, Lieutenant Kraildeck said as he learned to wrap hot stones safely. So simple, yet so effective. The best solutions usually are, Jake replied. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Commander Vexstar stood watching. His soldiers learned from their former prisoners. The Empire has much to learn from humanity, he admitted. Perhaps conquest is not always the answer. Perhaps not, Jake agreed. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply surviving the night. Image description for Leonardo AI, a sunrise scene on an alien. Plateau showing tall blue-scaled alien soldiers in frost-covered armor sitting around a human campfire learning survival techniques, while confident human prisoners demonstrate heated stone wrapping methods, with steam rising from warm ground and the golden morning light contrasting with the cold night's aftermath. Alien outpost visible in background with damaged buildings.